Inside a notorious and terrible prison in Poland, there were a number of female prison guards who wielded immense power and terror over the inmates during World War II. Pawiak Prison became a site of mass execution, terror, and in the rubble around the prison in Warsaw, there were makeshift firing ranges constructed where thousands were shot. The smell of the corpses, which were then cremated, permeated the cells, and the inmates knew what was coming for them. But the female guards of Pawiak oversaw the regime for the women inmates and the prisoners, and at each time there were hundreds of them locked up in overcrowded, small rooms. But the women guards were targeted for execution and assassination by the Polish resistance and the Home Army, and there were 3 who were executed in revenge and reprisal for the slaughter they had carried out within the site. This is the story of the executions of the female guards of Pawiak Prison. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Pawiak Prison became, during World War II, one of the roughest sites of incarceration. Following the invasion of Poland, the site saw thousands of inmates locked up in small cells, and things quickly became very overcrowded. As soon as the Germans invaded Poland, they rounded up people to be locked up at Pawiak in Warsaw, and over time, when the prison became controlled by the SIPO, the security police, and the SD, the security service, the conditions became much more ruthless and brutal. The Polish guards eventually were sacked and imprisoned themselves, and many who were arrested were political prisoners, and they were then later moved on to concentration camps, where they were executed and killed by the SS guards, being driven into the gas chambers. The regime was brutal within Pawiak, and hundreds were hanged in their cells, and they were also forced to conduct brutal labour and carry out pointless exercises, designed at exhausting them to the point where they then died. Every day, inmates were sent from the prison to the Gestapo headquarters in Warsaw, where they were then tortured and interrogated as to information about the Polish underground. Executions ramped up as the Second World War turned against the Germans following the defeat at the Battle of Stalingrad, but there was within the prison a women's prison itself. Part of Pawiak was kept separate for female prisoners, and those women suspected of being involved in the resistance. The women's ward became known as Serbia, and it was ran by the Gestapo. Initially it was designed to hold around 250 people, but during the occupation of Poland, 800 women at a time were locked up in the ward and inside this part of the prison. Serbia's ground floor contained a bathhouse and the commandant's office. The first floor contained general cells and lockups, and also cells for mothers with children who had been born inside of the prison. On the second floor was a hospital with 39 beds. Around 20,000 of the 100,000 inmates locked up in Pawiak were women who were held in this Serbia part. With this, a number of female guards worked alongside male guards to keep these specific female prisoners in check. They exhibited violence on an unprecedented scale, and they inflicted beatings with their truncheons and whips. Some executed the women in their cells, and others selected them to be dragged outside and then shot in the rubble of the former Warsaw ghetto. But the female guards' behaviour became known about, and across Warsaw, with the growing resistance movement in 1943 and 1944, the people began to fight back. They began to target the prison guards who worked at Pawiak, and they launched what was known as Special Combat Action Berkel, or Operation Berkel. This was aimed at assassinating the guards, including Franz Berkel, the deputy commandant of Pawiak Prison. But there were a number of women who were executed on the streets of Warsaw and assassinated by Polish underground resistance. One of these women was Jadwiga Podhorodeka. It was said of her crimes inside of Pawiak that Jadwiga Podhorodeka of Volksdeutsch was the Wachmeisterin at the Pawiak. She often stormed into cells, told us to stand to attention, used disciplinary punishments, and made frequent inspections. On the 29th of January 1944, Jadwiga Podhorodeka was targeted by the resistance, and specifically Counterintelligence Unit 993W. They had learned about her location, and they seized where she was. She was then shot dead and executed in cold blood. The resistance tended to leave the bodies out in the open too, to send a message. The authorities knew that there would be more targets, and there would be more female guards who were assassinated. Months before this specific assassination, in October 1943, the resistance had struck another woman, connected to the running of Pawiak Prison. Sabina Bykowska worked with a Gestapo officer named Ernst Weffels to work out how secret messages were being smuggled out of the prison to then the resistance, who would then use this action to coordinate attacks. It was found that the Polish staff in the prison's hospital, specifically within the Serbia unit where the female prisoners were held, were the ones responsible for smuggling out messages, and the underground resistance then quickly placed a death sentence on Weffels' head, and they found out about Sabina Bykowska's collaboration. Weffels was shot and executed, being taken out at close range, on the 1st of October 1943, but then 4 days later, on the 5th of October, Sabina was also shot and executed, and it was known that she was Weffels' partner, and he had also brutalised many inmates at the prison within the female camp. Another female guard and collaborator was Olga Nareska, who was involved in investigating the contact that the prisoners of Pawiak had with the underground, very similarly to how Weffels and Sabina Bykowska had also done. Because of this, the information got out to the underground, and she was too targeted for assassination and execution. The underground did tend to pass death sentences, and this was in a sense an execution, not an assassination. On the 28th of April 1944, a unit dispatched by Captain Zvudzmin struck and attacked Naveska, assassinating her in the open, taking her out and dispatching her with a quick gunshot to the head. She was at the time unarmed, and these resistance fighters had taken out another female guard of Pawiak Prison. Now there were many other female guards who worked at the prison, specifically within the Serbia section, who committed horrific crimes against the female inmates. As the Second World War went against the Germans, and the Warsaw Uprising was brutally and ruthlessly put down, inmate after inmate were led out into the rubble, and they were then shot, and many of the female guards selected their prisoners to be condemned. The resistors did attack a number of the guards and successfully sent a message to those running the prison that they would target those who committed atrocities and collaborated. The 3 executed and shot women were killed in public, and their bodies left out to send a brutal message, but a message which was also defiant. Eventually the Nazis would set fire to Pawiak Prison and destroy most of it, and many of the female guards who worked there managed to escape any form of justice and any form of punishment at the end of World War II. Their stories today are difficult to research, but they are some of the most ruthless women of World War II. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.